Well, hello everyone. Here we are at the WCET television studios in downtown Cincinnati on the 19th of February, 2007. That's hard to believe, isn't it, Milton?
Right.
And we have the honor of one of the distinguished gentlemen of Cincinnati, Mr. Milton J. Schloss, who has graciously agreed to be interviewed here today. And Milton, it's an honor. You and I have known each other for a long time, and your lovely wife and family, and it's just a pleasure to get you here and to be able to learn something about your experiences in World War II and prior to that, because you go way back. Mm-hmm. We all go way back nowadays, don't we?
Sure do.
Our crowd, the so-called greatest generation, we're all in our upper 80s and 90s and so forth. And it's very important that we have a session like this, because someday we're all going to be gone, and if we don't impart what we've learned and what we have experienced to the public, it's a great loss. And I know that your family will appreciate having this on tape, and you can share that with them. Tell me, where were you born, Milt?
I was born in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
November 15th, 1913.
How about that?
A long time ago.
I should say so.
My father had gone down there to open a little tailoring shop, and he soon became ill and died. And my mother's family, having been with Cincinnatians, we moved back to Cincinnati when I was 6 years old.
So your father died when you were 6?
Father died when I was 6, right.
Oh, what a terrible loss. My goodness, that's just... Well, do you remember much about old Louisville in those days?
Very little.
Yeah.
Very little.
Yeah. Probably didn't go to the Derby or anything like that.
I haven't been to the Derby yet either.
No, I haven't either. Okay, so you moved to Cincinnati about 1919?
That was about, yes.
Of course, you were too young for World War I.
That's right.
But where did you go to school here in Cincinnati?
I went to Avondale Public School.
Avondale Public.
And then I went to Hughes High School.
Oh, good old Hughes, my gosh.
And then from there I went to the University of Michigan.
Oh, you did? You're a Wolverine.
Wolverine.
Oh, that's too bad.
After 4 years there, came back and went to law school at UC.
Oh, you did, I should say. Well, so now through the 20s, that's when you were getting your elementary and high school education, and then college. When did you enter University of Michigan?
1930.
1930.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were a class of 34.
34, that's right.
Right. What did you study there at Michigan?
Oh, I studied political science.
Good, excellent.
Yeah,
That's my favorite.
Just majored in it because I happened to get to know a professor that we knew very well. And
did you have your eye on the law eventually?
No, not really. I had my eye on the meat business.
On the meat business?
Yeah, but I decided just to study law, to have it without any idea of practicing.
Right, but very important for your business career, absolutely. Was your family in the meat business?
Yes, it was Cons. They founded Cons.
Founded Cons, yeah.
That was my mother's maiden name.
I see. Were you related to Felix in any way?
No, they were estate stove.
There were a lot of Cons.
Yeah, they're another family completely.
I should say, yeah. Well, so 1934, you graduated from Michigan, and then did you go right into law school?
Yes, I went right straight to law school.
You came back to Cincinnati?
Came back to Cincinnati and enrolled in the law school, which was much smaller in those days.
Oh, yes.
Had 55 students, I think we had.
Is that?
Yeah.
You were a pioneer, weren't you?
Well, it was in the depth of the Depression.
Oh, yes.
And we lost a lot of people who couldn't afford it after a while.
Yes. Well, those days they're, as with you, they're very, very vivid in my memory, too.
Very emblazoned in my mind, the whole
Growing
Depression,
up as a boy, I should say. So then you finished law, what, in 2 years?
3.
3 years.
37.
37. And then what happened?
Then when I went into the meat business.
I see. Okay.
And stayed there till the onset of World War II.
Yes. Were you aware what was going on in the world in the late 30s?
Pretty well. Pretty
Pretty
well.
well, yes.
I knew about the rise of Hitler, Mussolini, and
Yes,
I kept pretty close tabs on that.
sure. And in those days, we only had radio
That's right.
for world news
That's
and
right.
events, and it was very
Right.
exciting to listen to the radio.
Right.
So along came Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. Had you gone into the service before?
No,
Pearl
I
Harbor?
had. I tried to enlist immediately after Pearl Harbor,
Right.
and then I did enlist in, I think, January, February,
Mm-hmm.
and wasn't called up until May of '42.
Right. And where'd they send you?
They sent me to Mississippi.
Oh boy,
And,
that was a shock too,
Biloxi.
wasn't it?
That was, and I lost about 20 pounds
Wow.
with exercise and poor food. But then I was, after that, I was sent to Florida for
Okay.
further training.
All right. Now, what was your field of training?
Well, the field of training then was simply infantry,
Okay.
and then I was sent over to Air Force School,
Mm-hmm.
and then from Air Force School, which was in Florida, I was sent up to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Indian Gap,
Mm-hmm.
where the armored school was, and also there was the intelligence school.
That was a very famous training
Yeah,
area,
and,
Indian Town
Yeah,
Gap.
I trained
yeah.
at both places, both the intelligence school and in,
Oh yes.
and got one funny story.
Good.
I was rooming with another fellow from Cincinnati who became the head of the English department in Michigan, named Marvin Fellheim, and we were staying with this private couple in their home. They had at least the third floor to the Army, and this was in January, and it was so cold. And I came downstairs to ask how we turned the heat on, and we had they had these old-time registers
Mm-hmm.
where you had to turn the heat on,
Sure.
and he came upstairs and found that we hadn't turned the knob. He went downstairs and told his wife, God, if this is the intelligence of the United States Army, God help us.
Oh boy, I know they're wonderful thing. I'm sure you've got a million stories to tell too. But moving right along, then after Indian Town Gap, where did you go?
We went to, we were in Harrisburg, and Harrisburg and Indian Gap, and then from there I stayed on as an instructor
Oh yeah.
in the intelligence school, and then when I went overseas, we were sent down to Goldsboro, North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
a godforsaken place that a lot of people will remember.
Sure.
And then we went overseas on the Queen Mary,
Oh boy.
and that was 12,000 men, 12 men to a stateroom,
Just imagine.
triple-decker beds.
Yeah.
No escort because they figured the Queen Mary could outrace any subs or
Right.
torpedoes,
Right.
which fortunately they
And
did.
she did. Yeah.
And then we landed in Gourock in Scotland,
Hmm.
which I think was about 5 days. I don't recall exactly. And from there on, we went down to into Scotland, went down to England, Aldermaston Court,
Mm-hmm.
and took further training down there. Took training actually in radio telephone, which was the biggest means of communication.
Very interesting. Yes.
And we learned from the British, and they had, we trained also at Uxbridge,
Mm-hmm.
which was also the place where the Battle of Britain was directed from. And that was interesting and very difficult, and I had a great deal of trouble understanding the British, and they had probably understanding me.
I know.
But we finally learned how to operate radio telephone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that relationship, of course, between the Yanks and the Brits became very strong, and in many, many ways, not only militarily and politically, but socially as well.
Right.
So many fellas met their girls over there and so forth. And well, that and you're talking about Uxbridge, of course, head of the intelligence center of the intelligence part of the Allied effort. Did you get out of Britain? Did you go to France? Or?
Oh yeah, then I went to France about 10 days after D-Day.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we were a air ground unit,
Uh-huh.
19th Tactical Command.
What was your rank then?
By then I was I think I was a
Captain, maybe?
first lieutenant.
First lieutenant.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So now you were officially in the Army or in the Air Corps or Air
well,
Force?
I think I was Army Air Corps, I think it was.
Okay, yeah. It was about that time they changed
Right.
from the Corps to the Force.
Yeah.
Over there. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so about 10 days after the Normandy
Yeah, right.
landings, things were pretty hot over there.
Yeah, well, of course, the beach was okay, although we went over in Liberty ships
Right.
and went down on in nets
Mm-hmm.
down.
Down the side of the
I
ship.
remember we were told, hold on the outside so nobody steps on your hands. And that was a pretty raunchy deal because the ship was not stable and neither was the landing
Absolutely.
craft.
Terrible.
So you came down to the end and you just about jumped into the LCI.
I know, and that
Land-
small thing rocking
landing
in the
craft
water.
infantry. And then we landed on the beach. There was no firing at us
No
there.
enemy firing. They'd
As
withdrawn
soon as we got
by
inland
that.
a little bit, there was fire, but nothing on a beach.
Right, right. So you saw a lot of destruction
That's
there.
right. Oh yeah.
And you saw those barriers that the Nazis had
Well,
put in the
yeah,
water
right.
to
Right. They
keep
were all
the
there.
boats from coming in and all that sort of thing.
Right.
Then were you attached to a division?
We worked with a number of divisions.
Okay.
I remember mostly the 4th Armored,
Oh
the
yeah.
5th Infantry, the 30th Infantry, and we worked with their intelligence officers who were working with their operations officers.
Mm-hmm.
And we directed aircraft into ground targets and then
Wow.
also did some flying in L5s for observation.
Those little
Yeah.
those little jobs.
That's
Yeah.
right.
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 That was the kind of a plane that Glenn Miller was lost in, you know.
Was it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
an L5.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah,
but
right.
but carrying on with that, so you were advancing with the 4th Armored and
4th Armored, 5th Infantry.
and the 5th
30th
Infantry, 5th
Infantry.
Division. Right,
And
right,
then we were in Patton's army.
right. 3rd Army.
And of course that took off after being held up. Of course we landed, and actually we landed and then went north into the Cherbourg Peninsula
Oh yes.
and participated in the attack on Cherbourg,
Right.
and then came back down the peninsula.
That was a terrible battle.
Oh yeah, that was
Terrible. Because the Germans were so
That's right.
determined to hold.
determined to hold the port,
Yeah, right.
and they destroyed the port.
Yeah, yeah,
But
right.
then we were in the Cherbourg Peninsula for a while until the breakthrough at St. Lo.
Oh yes.
And from that breakthrough, St. Lo was just absolutely destroyed.
Yeah.
It was a town that was in like a large circular valley, and it was all but destroyed.
Goodness sakes.
And but the breakthrough came. That's when also at the time that when the B-17 bombers were used,
Yes.
and the general, I forget his name now, who was killed, was up front with the troops and
Mhm.
killed in that friendly fire.
Right. right.
or friendly bombs.
Aye, so called. Yes, I know. It was a terrible time. Did you ever get to see Patton?
Saw him once. It scared the hell out of me.
He was a fearsome guy,
no,
wasn't he?
he was. He was just as fearsome to his own troops as he was to the enemy.
But they adored him and they
Yeah.
followed him to the man.
That's right.
He inspired tremendous
Yeah, I just
loyalty.
saw him once. And
Yeah.
I'm glad I had my helmet on because there was another soldier that had the stocking cap on, and he ripped off his head.
No kidding.
Told him to get in uniform.
Oh my
I'll
God.
never forget that.
Yeah, I should say. Well, that is something special, I should say. Have you written your memoirs or anything like
Well,
that?
I wrote a history of my life for my grandchildren, just
Right.
privately,
Yes.
and
It's very important.
yeah, and that
Good for
that
you.
I think they've enjoyed.
That's great for you. Well, now this interview on on tape will shore up that for them too. How far did you go in Europe?
Well, we actually went the farthest I think of any unit.
No kidding.
We ended up in a town called Pribram in Czechoslovakia,
My gosh,
and
that's well into the
that's east
heart
of
of
Prague.
Europe.
East of Prague,
Yeah. Okay.
and we were pulled back, I think, 150 miles to let the Russians in,
Oh boy,
and
that was
and we were
sad.
pulled back to a town called Bad Kissingen,
Mm-hmm.
which was a German Bad and Bath town of mineral water and so forth.
Right, a spa.
Very
sort of.
beautiful town, a nice
Right.
little town.
How did you feel about that when you got the orders to pull back
Oh, I don't know. We were just happy to be moving somewhere.
and being alive?
Being alive, that's right. I don't think I had any,
Yeah,
I didn't have any political reaction to that
Right.
at all.
right. I think that came later.
Yeah.
As we all
right.
experienced that,
Right.
because of the consequences that took place
That's right. That's
because
right.
of such things, letting
Right.
the Russians come in and
Right.
taking over when we had the opportunity to
Go to
exert
Berlin.
our influence throughout Europe
That's right.
instead of letting them come in. We got, I know,
But
well, we can't.
we were in the army and weren't political at all.
I know how you feel. Well, any other funny experiences that you?
Well, I remember some other experiences we had. One we, in the march across Germany, one of the things we did was we came to the town of Frankfurt, and the Germans were retreating,
Mm-hmm.
and but they had their 88 zeroed in on most of the bridges that were still up. The one bridge that was still up that I do remember was the one over the Main River, right by the, not far from the railroad station.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told to go there, and there was a jet plant that had been across in Germany, across the Main River. And we were given the job of getting whatever was still left of the jet plant.
Mm-hmm.
So we crossed that. Fortunately, we were on foot, and the 88s that were zeroed in on vehicles coming across the bridge weren't firing at the time. But we went across that bridge. It's the fastest I ever ran in my
I
life.
can imagine so.
But we got over there and got some things out of the plant
Right.
and came back.
Well, for our viewers, Mr. Schloss's mention of the 88 means 88 millimeter size cannon shells.
Actually, the most effective weapon in the war
Exactly.
until we got a self-propelled 155.
Right. Exactly.
But our 75s were nothing against
No.
the German tanks,
no.
unless they caught them in the flanks.
Yeah. That's one thing about the Germans. They did have well-built
Well-built tanks, great
tanks and
with 88
airplanes as
millimeter
well.
guns.
Right. Well, then, when you were pulled back, did you just stay
We sat,
there?
yeah, well, we sat in Bad Kissingen, and actually, when the war came to an end, they brought golf clubs and things over to a little 9-hole course. The engineers rehabilitated.
Good old Yankee ingenuity.
So we played golf for a little while there.
And that's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I should say. Well, what
Prior to that, I think the most memorable experience I had was when we were in support of the 30th Division. We came across the first concentration camp, a camp called Ohrdruf in Germany, near, I was up in near Gotha, and that was the most horrible sight I've ever seen. It's still imprinted on my mind.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Sure it does.
They had, I'm Jewish, and naturally I reacted to
Of course.
the people who were incarcerated there, the few that were living, and
There were a few living.
and they were almost dead too.
Yes.
And they had been starved. It was not a concentration camp where they were out to kill the people, but they killed them with working them to death.
Of course.
And it
Slave labor.
slave labor, and they had the slave labor was in making a artillery site, as I recall, for sites that had been overrun by the Americans in France,
Right.
and they were working on the sites which they never finished
Right.
because we got there faster than that.
Goodness, what an experience.
Well, that was terrible. The first thing we knew about, didn't even know about the camp. The first thing we did was smell it.
Uh-huh.
And then we got there, and they had all these bodies just thrown into lime pits.
Yes.
And then the few that were still living, we were told not to feed them too fast or anything either.
Yes, that's true.
And, but they were all starvation.
Oh, yeah, they must have been ravenous for food and water
Right.
and everything, and you had to be very careful about that to try and preserve
Right.
who was still alive. Yeah,
Right.
that's so. Well, you certainly have seen a lot, Milt, and and what I admire about you, among other things, of course, is your ability to remember so well.
Well, it's not so great anymore. But,
Well, I know, but I think your memory is very, very good.
well, some things are just so
Well, some things you never forget.
never forget. That's right.
Impregnated in your mind.
I remember the other
Tell
one
us.
of the other things that's funny now, but it wasn't funny then. One of our jobs was to in these L5s when certain units, I remember particularly the 4th Armored, was out under radio silence.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know where they were, and they didn't know where to bomb or anything. So they sent us out looking for the 4th Armored Division by air. And we found them with the plane going up, I don't know how many feet, and back down again. We were over the muzzle blast of the new self-propelled 155s,
Oh my God!
which had just been issued,
Wow.
and they were firing on the Germans, and we were over the muzzle blast. The plane, I don't know, I thought it went up 1,000 feet, I don't know. I know the pilot looked at me and I looked at him. I thought, you don't know what we're doing, I don't either. But we looked down and finally found
That
these
was-
Cerise panels
Oh,
that they carried. So
tremendous
that's
concussion.
how
from
we
those.
located the 4th Armored Division.
Well, there they are.
Yeah.
Well, that is something that a lot of people don't know about. And anything else come to mind that?
No, not particularly. I'm just trying to think of.
Yeah.
We had, in the march across France, I remember particularly the French people being so welcoming.
Yes.
And they aren't so welcome to us now, but
For the French are the French, and that's all you can say about them.
but they, we went through these towns, and every town was the same thing, was
Welcoming, yeah.
welcoming.
And you know that you brought up an important point there, Milt, and that is that the attitude of the French people at that time. Now today, we know about the politics and so forth, but I haven't been to the European battlefields. Have you gone back?
Yes, went back on
You went
the
back.
50th anniversary.
Oh, wonderful. Well, then, of course, then you experienced that warmth again
Right.
from the French there.
Particularly in Normandy.
Yes, because they did, and they remember so well
That's right,
today.
and they had every reason to be hating us because we'd bombed the place.
Oh,
and
well, I know.
Normandy was really a mess.
Oh, yeah.
But it's such beautiful country, plus so fertile too.
Yes.
It's really the breadbasket of France.
Exactly, and the wine country and
right.
everything. Oh my goodness. Well, of course, that's something, and that's what people today have difficulty understanding. You know what happened 60 years ago, and the fact that yes, there was tremendous devastation, but you know, we didn't start it,
No, we didn't start.
and we came to help and to save. And this is one of the great things about our nation.
That's right.
The greatest country in the world of history of all times, and I hope people will, young people will realize
That's
that
right.
because we've been the most generous, and we helped rebuild our enemies.
That's right.
Germany and
And
Japan.
that's unfortunately the last war we won. I
Yes.
think, too.
Yes.
Every one of them, some political business comes in and blocks us from finishing. But,
That's exactly right. The whole philosophy has changed so much. Well, listen, we've just been so honored. Now, I want to ask you briefly, when the war was over, did you celebrate VE Day in Europe?
No, I celebrated VE Day actually at home
Oh, you did. You were
because we were. No, I'm wrong about that. I was VJ Day. at
VJ
home.
Day. That was in
That's right.
September. Yeah.
VE Day. I was still in France. Well,
France.
in Germany actually, in Bad Kissingen,
Oh, yeah.
and then
Playing golf.
playing golf, and then my mother took sick with a heart attack,
Oh,
and I was given a leave to come home, so I didn't go to the Pacific
right.
with my outfit, which was on the water when the war ended.
Is that so?
So
That
I
close.
simply went back to Indiantown Gap,
Uh-huh.
got out of the Army.
I see.
And I remember they told me I'd been in grade as a captain long enough to go out as a major.
Good.
And I said, that's fine.
I'll take it.
How do we do that? Well, you'll have to wait till tomorrow to do that. We can do the paperwork. I said, can I get out as a captain today? They said yes, and I did. I knew the Army. I might be there another 6 months.
You didn't want to take a chance of
take a
getting
chance.
held up
That's
anymore.
right.
And getting back to Cincinnati.
Right.
The Queen City.
Right.
How wonderful. And your welcoming family. And
Oh yeah.
Did you have siblings?
Oh yeah. I had a child when I went in the Army.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I had a
Oh,
child when I went in the Army. Was born when I was in basic training.
How about that?
And then I had a child born while I was overseas.
Well, you were an old man.
That's right.
You
I
know how
was.
we
I
youngsters
was 30
regarded
I was
anybody
30
over
years old.
anybody over 30 years old was an old man.
That's right. That's what I was. And then I had a third son born after I was actually born later after.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one sister.
One sister.
There who died very early in her life.
Oh, I see.
Cancer.
Yeah. Well, so you got back to Cincinnati and you went right into cons, did you?
Well, as a matter of fact, my wife and I had decided at the time we'd take a 2-week vacation. And I'll never forget 5:30 the next morning, Monday morning, my uncle called me. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sleeping."
5:30 in the morning?
And he says, "Well, come on down here." I'd been a cattle buyer before the war.
I see.
He says, "We lost our cattle buyer today. He went to work to somebody else. We got a big run of the cattle. Come on down." Well, I hadn't bought cattle for years. I got right back in, and I think it was a blessing in disguise, because a lot of people had trouble getting out of the Army and
Right.
out of that, and I was pushed back into work immediately,
Yes.
and I think it really was the best thing for me.
That is,
I didn't think so at the time, but
I'm sure. 5:30 in the morning. Well, that's a great story, Milt, and we just want to thank you so much for opening up and being so warm and welcoming, and I admire your memory, and I think it's just terrific, and I've been very honored to have the chance to speak with you, and I know that people who will view this on Channel 48, and God bless Channel 48, you know, and the first public franchise television station in the country.
That's what I understand.
Remember that? Remember that? Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, here we are, and I think we are blessed to have had the opportunity to know Milton J. Schloss.
Oh, thank you very much.
And we wish you a much longer life. I'm sure you're going to hit a century.
Well, I hope so. I
I
got
hope
7
so
more
too.
years.
Okay. Well, thank you so
Okay,
much,
fine.
and that's it. Thank you for your watching.